walking point was very, very scary. You've got everybody behind you, and particularly where we were at. We were in the jungle where sometimes it was so thick, the only way we could get through it was with a machete. Okay, so you're going through, and you're actually leading the way, and you're cutting this elephant grass down that's over your head. So you can't really see it to the left of you, you can't really see it to the right of you, but you're just cutting a path going through. Normally, if the enemy is out there, that guy walking point, he's not going to be in pretty good shape. I mean, it's a real scary job. But some people volunteered for it. Sometimes they actually had to say you were going to walk point. I probably walked point 2 or 3 times, and I did not like it. I mean, I didn't see any longevity in walking point at all. One of the reasons I actually took the machine gun is because if you had the 60, you didn't have to walk point.
You have a point person, and I'd have a second person behind them. A point person looking straight down at the trail. Even though there weren't a lot of booby traps, you wanted to look real close at where you were stepping. And the second person behind them looking higher. Humans don't look up. People do not look up, and you could try it, and it's one of the reasons deer stands, maybe it's mammals don't look up.
What they would do is they would belt themselves up in a tree. So you'd take fire, you'd return fire, and the only way you know they were dead is if they fell out of the tree or they dropped their weapon, because they'd strapped themselves up.
Even in the bunkers, underground bunkers where they're cooking, the aroma comes up and comes out of the entrance and the exit. You can smell it. And when you smell it, you know something is there. You stop the whole platoon, you stop, because you want to evaluate where the smell is coming from. And you know it's under you. You know it's under you.
You learn from the guys that the dikes around the rice paddies, you do not walk on the dikes because of booby traps. The Viet Cong always put booby traps in the path of least resistance because they realized that we're going to take the easy way to try to walk. We're going to walk down a trail, or we're going to walk on the dike, especially in wet weather. We're going to walk on that dike so we don't have to walk through the rice paddy.
I would say that 60 or 70% of my casualties were from booby traps, not from anything else. Maybe more than that. They were a huge problem, and it was a constant state of anxiety. And you just learned to live with it. You almost became fatalistic. And the troops did too, the Marines did too. We all knew what we were dealing with. Everybody had the same exposure, officers, the troops. We were out on an all-night patrol, and I'd had a lot of people. It was a bad patrol, and everybody was tired. This was probably 7 o'clock in the morning, so I headed up to the front, and just about the time I got there, one of my Marines stepped through a barrier across the road, which he shouldn't have done. And when he did that, it was a booby trap. He lost his leg from the knee down. I got hit in the head, and the shoulder, and the stomach, and the leg, none of which were critical, but all of which appeared to be relatively serious at the time. And the helicopters came and got us all and took us to the hospital. He, of course, was gone, and I got out of the hospital probably 3 weeks later and was back out in the field. After I got out of the hospital, you feel invincible. It's really an interesting psychological phenomenon. Some sort of fear about that goes away in an odd way that it's hard to describe to you unless it's happened. And from then on, I just didn't really care. I mean, I cared, but it was not a barrier to performance from that point on. And I tell people today, kind of with tongue in cheek, but I think I'm serious, is it's really important at 23 to learn that you're going to die, because it affects the rest of your life. And most people don't have that happen until they're in their 50s or 60s. And so from that standpoint, it was a positive influence on what happened to me for the rest of my life.
When the mission comes in, you fly the mission. And every soldier in Vietnam knew that. They knew that if they got wounded, dust off was coming. They were going to be evacuated. And I think that was a tremendous morale piece for our troops. The mission comes in, it's no sitting around waiting to see if you're going to go or call up a few guys and see if you can get somebody to do the mission. No. The mission comes in, and when they hit the horn, you're headed to your aircraft. You hadn't even got your mission yet. You hadn't got the details. You don't know your call signs, you don't know your radio frequencies, you don't know the status of the patient, you don't know whether the LZ is hot. You may not know any of that. But when the horn goes, you go to the aircraft. It's not, well, are we going to take this mission or not? Or is the weather too bad? Or no, you fly the mission.
You know, the misconception of corpsmen and medics is that our jobs are to save lives. No. Our jobs are to keep as many weapons firing, many soldiers or Marines in the fight as possible. So if I had 8 guys down, I would triage basically in reverse. I would see the guy, oh, you just got a nick here. Here's a Band-Aid, pat him on the butt, give him back their rifle, and go back and start shooting some more.
You do things that you don't even think about. Someone's calling for a corpsman, you got to go. There were times where I second-guessed myself and said, do you really want to do this? This is all a split second. You had no choice. You had to go. That was your job. There were 2 occasions where I didn't even know these Marines, 2 different firefights, when each of them, 2 different times, touched me on the shoulder and said, Doc, I'll go, you stay here. And these 2 guys did not come back. They were killed.
And what they were trying to do was interesting, was not trying to kill you as much as trying to disable somebody, because if you ever carried a body, it takes 4 people to carry a body. And so you not only have the Marine that's been injured, and you want to medevac them and put them on a helicopter or get them out, get them to a hospital unit, you put 5 people out of action, sometimes 6, if you count the corpsmen.
It was basic stuff. Stop the bleeding, maintain the airway, tourniquets, things of that nature. If we could get them out of there, medevac them out within the hour, as they called it, the golden hour, and they could get back to the rear, 1st Medical Battalion, for the most part, they were going to be saved.
I don't ever recall in my 2 years in Vietnam a mission ever being declined. Even when the LZ was hot. Now, sometimes you may, if the LZ is real hot, you may wait for a gun support. You got to make some choices. See, it's one thing to get a wounded soldier up, but do you want to risk the life of your crew for other people? So you make some critical choices, and that's the aircraft commander's job. Are you going to put your crew, not only yourself, but your whole entire crew, in harm's way to pull a soldier out? Okay? And that's a tough choice, because everybody wants to be rescued.
Our job was to stabilize and transport. And the problem was always the second part, the transport part. Because sometimes your casualties were so heavy that you couldn't get them out. Or they couldn't get helicopters in because they get shot down. Or the jungle was so thick you couldn't get a helicopter in anyway. And so you, as a corpsman, you had to deal with everything. From the minor injuries to the life-threatening and to the dying. And on certain occasions you would have to, the skipper would say, okay, I can get 6 guys out. I've got 10 down, pick 6. And the rest are going to have to wait tonight. And so you'd basically play God.
The military used 3 types of dogs. They used tracker dogs, sentry dogs, and scout dogs. There had to be a certain amount of risk there for them to use a dog. They just didn't have enough dogs to scatter all over the place. The whole relationship with my dogs was that they did not want anything to happen to me. They didn't care. They couldn't tell the difference between NVA, between the VC, a GI. It didn't make any difference at all. All they knew is when you put that leather collar on them, fun was over. It was time to work. They would never bark. You had to train your dog not to bark because they'd give your position away. If it was a man, they would stop moving and their ears would kick back on them and they would actually move in the direction where the scent was coming from or the noise was coming from. Normally what they would do is smell. Most of the time you could sense something was wrong because they would smell. And a lot of times when these things were being set, apparently that the VC would urinate and stuff like this, and where we may not be able to smell it, they could smell it. They were never wrong. We'd give the alerts very quickly. And there were bounties on us. The VC paid a bounty on killing a dog handler. Most people that I've talked to that were in Vietnam really like to have dogs around, whether they were scout dogs or sentry dogs. It's just sort of added that extra layer of security or that extra layer of, maybe it's a better chance of me getting home. I had fallen asleep on my feet. The dog was beside me. He was just sitting there beside me. And I was just like off in a daze. So maybe not in a complete sleep, but my eyes were closed. And the next thing I knew is that I felt this dog yank my wrist because it was trained when it heard like a bolt shut or any type of pinging noise to drop to the ground. And the dog went to the ground. I knew something was wrong because this dog didn't drop to the ground just because it was bored. And when I opened my eyes, there was a really, really bright flash of light. Maybe it was a bagular torpedo. I don't know what it was. It was something that the dog heard the noise to activate it to fall to the ground. And that pulled me out of the stupor. And fortunately, I wasn't hurt by the blast. It knocked me down, but that was it. A dog gives you unconditional love. It'll do anything for you. Anything, anything. Even when dogs are treated cruelly, they still unconditionally love their handlers for some reason. If you build that relationship between you and that dog, it would do anything for you. It doesn't care about any other GI. It doesn't care about anybody around you. All it cared about was you, and it would literally die for you.
One time they brought this body over, and the guys were all crying, and I'm on the helicopter, and they're bringing this body in burlap, and they're coming in, and they're crying their eyes out. And I said, I thought it was just another soldier, not just another soldier, but a soldier. Then I saw a paw sticking out. It was the one-eyed dog who had saved the guys several times. He lost his eye saving them, and now he was killed. So that, incidentally about dogs, the soldiers took dogs very serious. When they died, they buried them. And when we moved on, they dug the dog up and took them to another cemetery.
Right before you went home, what you had to do was take your dogs and go down. You took them to the vet. You muzzled them and took them to the vet. And he made you go through a series of things, and he determined whether that dog was a retrain or not, what they called a retrain, where they send back to Okinawa and retrain with another handler to bring back to Vietnam. Because one thing in Vietnam is that you couldn't, in our unit, you couldn't leave until you were replaced by another dog handler. There had to be another dog handler to replace you before you left. And he said that they weren't, so they put him under while I was there. I held the dogs, and I never, at the time, it was kind of like when I was getting short, come home, I didn't care what, I had developed a tremendous relationship with that dog. All I wanted to do was get the hell home, and it was just another step for me to get home. I love that dog, I love those dogs, but I just wanted to get home.